Ruth, I do want to ask you where you get the audacity.
I'm going to be very honest. That one dropped straight from heaven.
That is such a beautiful embodiment of like the mosaic of Christian community.
Yes. This is what I'm going
Light
to
bulb.
say. Yeah, the light bulb just went off. This is what I'm going to say. And this might go against the grain.
When Ruth said that was a big light bulb moment for myself. There's a specific kind of type of content that Legacy has been publishing, and it has been getting dramatic reach and traction online. That's why I love social media so much. I'm having now a light bulb moment. Thank you, Ruth. Today, we're highlighting a church that has gone viral on social media, received millions of views, but not from sermon clips. Instead, this church's viral content emphasizes prayer, spiritual practice, and biblical exposition, the kind of content that aligns so well with the mission of the local church, and yet, for many, doesn't get a spot in the weekly social media calendar. Maybe because it's difficult to do well. It doesn't need to be, though. In today's episode, we're joined by Ruth and Vitaly of Legacy Church, and they share in great depth what it is about these posts that helps them perform so well. There's a ton of granular, extra practical tips in this episode, so make sure to take some notes. Okay, today we are joined by Ruth and Vitaly. Ruth is the social media director. Vitaly is the production director at Legacy Church, a church from and in Massachusetts. Ruth, Vitaly, welcome to the Pro Church Tool Show. Great to have you.
Yeah, great to be here.
Nice to be here.
First question we always ask when we're sitting down with a church is, for all those listening and watching, maybe you can provide some context for your church, kind of its history, its tradition, size, and then your different positions and roles within it.
Oh, okay. So Legacy Church is a community church that's based in Chicopee, Massachusetts. The heart of Legacy Church here is just to change our world through the love of Jesus, and just spreading the gospel of Jesus. And we care so much about community and fellowship. And so in everything that we do, that's sort of what goes forth, even to the point of, we call our time in the cafe our second service because it means that much to us. So after we come in and we share the word, we fellowship and worship, then we go into the cafe. Just like how Jesus broke bread, we drink coffee. And so that's the work that we're doing here. And we believe so strongly in the power of God, and in everything that we do, we really just want to highlight that. And then maybe Vitaly could speak a bit about the history.
History-wise, I believe our senior pastor, Vasily Tokayev, has been pastoring this church for over 40 years already. We've been through multiple buildings, but the message has stayed the same, is to impact our community and to bring non-believers to Christ and just empower one another. And that has just stuck through time and time again.
Now, I have heard from other churches, pastors, and church plants in New England about some of the challenges of ministering in that area. Could you tell us a little bit about what it's like to serve in, Massachusetts and the Northeast in general?
Oh, that is a big question. But yeah, I think what is challenging about churches or serving in this area is because I do believe that the inception of revival, if I'm not mistaken, did start in this part of the United States. I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and they made that point that some years back, like this was really the epicenter of revival and people really being on fire for God. And so obviously over the years, sometimes, when something starts in a region, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think that if you just look at how things naturally go in life, there's a sense of familiarity. You get familiar with things that are close to you, things that you're used to. So in New England, there is that sense, I feel, where it's harder sometimes to come across because it is an experience that people have been used to over the years, versus in other places where maybe you can say they're now catching the fire, they're now catching revelation. And so people are more excited to go to events, they're more excited to go to conferences, more excited to go to church. And so that's really where that's really where the hurdle might be. And I would say for us specifically, because of how much we do believe in the power of God, there's also the battle of sort of intellectualism versus believing in God, because people are so used to things done a certain way. And so we try to sort of rationalize how God moves with our own minds. And it's just really coming out of that space and entering into moving and flowing with God. And which all goes back to that whole sense of, familiarity, really. Because when you're used to a thing, it's difficult to see it come in a different way.
And can you each say how long you've been at the church, at Legacy?
I have been here for around 8 years.
And I have been here for about 5 years.
Okay, so pretty good, decent amount of time spent at the church. It sounds like it's been around for multiple decades now. Got a feel for the area that you're serving in. The reason that you came across my feed is there's a specific kind of type of content that Legacy has been publishing, and it has been getting dramatic reach and traction online. Before we get to that specific type of post, what is kind of Ruth? This is for you. What's your objective for social, and how does it align with Legacy's mission overall?
I think so. I would not. I think, but I know. So my objective for social media can be summed up in one word, which is message. Like, what is the message of our church? So the way we like to think of it is, if someone has never been to our church, if someone has never stepped foot at Legacy Church, how will our social media let them know what our church believes in, what our church stands for, what our church is about? And so really taking it from the place of the church page being a bulletin board that's just telling people when the next event is, come to church on Sunday, because sometimes social media for churches ends up feeling like a virtual bulletin board that's just spreading announcements. But for us, it was, for one, yes, what is the message? And then the other part of it too is just really thinking of social media as like a virtual evangelism tool, that not everyone that comes across your page may necessarily come to your church, but your page can serve a greater vision, a greater purpose of being a virtual church for someone to some degree or some capacity. So I think in a broad sense of things, that's the objective with how we run our social media. And we can
that's so good. That's so good, Ruth, because to what you were saying earlier about revival, like the nature of revival is many people being drawn to what God is doing in a specific place at a specific time. And that's kind of how your content found us. This specific type of post is reaching a dramatic amount of people. We're talking hundreds of thousands of people. And so that there is that is very congruent with what you're talking about and the nature of the message of God drawing so many people towards it. That's what these posts are accomplishing on social media, specifically on Instagram Reels. And so the post we're talking about is, it's a reel, and it kind of is outside the boundary of a lot of the ways we talk about traditionally using Reels, which is posting small portions of your sermons, which you do and your church does very well. But these specific posts that came across our feeds all the way up here in Canada are a little bit different. I guess I'd categorize them as a list post, and they usually go like this: 3 declarations to say over your spouse or to pray for your children. And you have 3 things, usually, often, overlaid with text, overlaid over some footage from your church or some B-roll. And those types of posts, it almost seems without fail, whenever your church posts this type of post on your Instagram, it has dramatic reach compared to anything else you're doing. So talk to us about the inception of that post, where that idea came from, and also why you think those posts are connecting with so many people online.
Oh, that's a really great question. And definitely shout out to Vitaly, because he makes the B-roll happen for me. Because with I really do believe the B-roll. It's because it's sort of like it's like an overall thought, right? So the B-roll, the videos that are attached to the messages also tie into the message. So, for instance, if I'm doing biblical declarations on marriage, I'm looking through the shots that Vitali took that shows someone with like a ring on their finger because I want the video to send the message of what we're trying to convey. So yes, props to Vitali and all the work that he's doing. But as far as the idea, I mean, we are Christians, so I will say I pray about social media, I pray about the strategy, and I pray about which direction to go. And I really do believe that God gives me the direction because I don't know where these ideas come from. But then when they come and I start to implement it, and then I feel like I start getting the realization of or the understanding of why that idea worked or why that idea was good. And then I replicate whatever was good. And so I think, so as far as the idea in general, going back to our objective being a message, sending a message across. I know for social media, the attention span is is like really, really tiny. And so if we're gonna get a message across to people, it's like, for one, how does this message resonate with you? Number two, how is this reel gonna help you in your life at all? So if you were to chance upon any of our reels, what are you getting out of it? What can you take home? And how can you implement anything that we talk about to help your life like move in a particular direction? And so the biblical declaration was an idea. And with the scripture, like it's one thing to say, pray for your spouse. And it's another thing to say, this is how you can pray for your spouse. Because
that's so good.
Like I think sometimes we just assume that people know,
They
but
just know how to pray.
yeah,
But sometimes they need sometimes like bullet points, but like this is a
Yes.
good way to pray for your spouse.
This is a good way to do it. This is a good way to go about it. So that's really the mindset behind it. And then definitely, I think repetition. Though this is something I live by. Repetition is emphasis. When you repeat something multiple times, you're emphasizing the point. And so the first time we did the declaration post, it resonated with people. And so I'm like, there's no reason for me to like think of a new concept. So I literally did the exact same style. That way, if you come across it again, because you've seen it before, like it registers in your mind, oh, this is something I saw, but the first one was marriage. Oh, this one's finances. And so you're sort of, you're creating that emphasis in people's minds rather than trying to come up with something new, all over again.
I think there's so much that we can pull apart here and kind of like dissect what about this specific post framework is leading to its success. But the first thing was, hey, I found a post framework that worked and I went back to it. We always say, repeat the best, forget the rest, continue to test. So you found a post framework that worked. You're like, okay, let's take this identical framework and just change the focus, the subject matter, but the post framework's going to stay the same. Or there was a time when you had never posted something like this ever before. And then you found this post, oh, I'm just going to create one like this, and it performed so well. That was from the continue to test stanza in kind of those three. It's really easy to remember for social media in your church. Repeat the best, forget the rest, continue to test. The second thing is these posts are all very short. They are a matter of seconds. And I think that plays an important role in the algorithm giving it this expanded amount of reach. Because what happens is there's a lot of text. And if you're watching this might be one of the Pro Church Tool shows episodes that you want to watch, because we're going to be putting all of these posts on the screen. But just for context, one of them that I've got in front of me here is, okay, three biblical declarations to pray over your finances. That's the title of the post. There are 3 bullet points, all cited, sourced with scripture. There's probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this is great radio, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 lines of text. But the overall post is under 10 seconds in length, meaning it is impossible to read through all of this text before the post begins to replay. Mm-hmm. And what that means is the overall watch time for this post is likely very close to 100% or even higher than 100% because so many people are watching it a second time as they read through. This is a tactic, a hack. I don't know if the algorithms are ever going to get wise to this. Seems like the algorithms could figure this out. Maybe Instagram Reels, it's still learning its algorithm. This is kind of one of those hacks that you can exploit. But that's another huge element to this. Was that a conscious thought, either of your fronts? Hey, we want to keep this short, because I think the natural thought would be, all right, I got my timeline in front of me inside of Adobe Premiere or whatever I'm using to create this video. I'm going to have this backing track, or I'm going to have this length of timeline. I need to be able to read through this whole thing before the video is done. That's kind of how you typically edit. This is so short, obviously no one could ever read it in that length of time. Was that a conscious thought? Accidental? Tell me more.
It was definitely conscious. It was definitely conscious. Just for the looping effect, so people can loop and take their time to read it. And then also, for me, it's also the sound bite that I'm using. It's like when you're playing through the sound bite, the way, I guess whatever sound bite I'm using, the way it loops and starts over,
it's cohesive and doesn't chop up, so kind of it seems all nice and smooth, like you're watching just one full video for a minute, but it's really just 10 seconds. But the way the audio loops with it and the way the visual loops, it's like, oh, I'm just watching this video while I'm reading everything.
Exactly. And so the sound bite, it plays into it as well. And so it loops in a way where the listener feels like the song is gonna continue, but then it's starting all over again, just tying into that whole thing.
Wow, Ruth. You really got him with that. That's a great tip. So as repeating on beat, now this is a track on this specific post that you grabbed in from Instagram. So you weren't in Premiere, I don't believe, looping it down to the exact frame. So is that difficult to do when you're kind of using your fingers and trying to pinch it together inside of the actual Instagram app?
I wouldn't say difficult, but it definitely requires a bit of tact. But it's not difficult. It's just making sure. It's just that little toggle line, just making sure it stays where you need it to stay. But not difficult. Just precision will be the word.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we've all been there, you're just obsessing over that exact, that's not quite it, and then you move it, but then you go too far, and these apps, man, I have small, dainty fingers, I don't know how Alex would do it.
Honestly, there are videos I see both on TikTok and Reels that are created and produced by people much younger than me, I can tell, and I'm realizing that I'm getting old, because I'm watching these videos, and I'm like, how are these kids doing this in this app? It's beyond me. But Vitaly, I'm so glad that you're joining us today, because on the show and when we talk to churches who are really excelling on social media, we talk to a lot of social media directors. And I'm so glad you're here, because you have a very unique role in the social media production, because like Ruth is saying, she's coming up with these ideas, she's got the content, she's got the vision, but it's all built and it's overlaid on top of the footage that you're shooting and that you're empowering your social media team with. So I'm just curious, when you're shooting at church, shooting video, shooting B-roll, how much of your mindset is, oh, I'm filming this for this purpose, whether I'm recording the service or shooting B-roll for a video, and how much are you shooting and thinking, oh, I want to capture something specific here for social media to empower our social media team?
I would say around 50-50-ish, but most of the time I'm literally just in prayer, walking around in my camera during worship. I'm literally just walking around praying, and then something will catch my eye, or the Spirit will speak, and he's like, hey, go here right now. And then I'm like, okay. Then I'm there, and I was like, oh, I see someone having an emotional moment, or the worship team's in like chorus of a song, and it's just like really hidden. I was like, oh, this can be used. This can be used. And sometimes I am just thinking consciously of what Ruth has an idea for. I remember, I believe like last week, she was like, hey, I want a shot from like behind the worship team during prayer or during worship. And I was like, okay, perfect. So I just sneak myself behind there, and I was like, all right, incognito, and then just get it done. But it's very interesting, good to have practical applications for visionary ideas. So you
Yeah,
take
that's so good.
what she thinks and what she envisions, and it's like, okay, how can I make this come to life? How can I execute this?
Yeah. And it sounds like you two are collaborating like very often and very closely with each other. So tell me more about your team. Is it just the two of you, or are there more people involved in the production side and the social media side?
I know we have more people on our team. We're just the directors of it. So I do have more photographers, but I always use more. And we do have social media people, but again, we can always use more.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think
Now,
to Vitali's point, like he was just saying something that sort of it brought something to mind. I feel like with social media and the way that we go about it, sometimes, well, not sometimes, oftentimes, knowing the end goal for what it is that you're doing, it helps you on the front end. So it's not just like, oh, let's just grab shots at church. But if we know the goal and the vision for what we need the shots for, what we're trying to accomplish with the shots, then that informs him on what to do on Sunday mornings, the kind of videos that he needs to take or to talk to his team about. So then that's how you really have that like cohesive, social media and production relationship where we're not on different spaces with what we're doing.
Ruth, I do want to ask you where you get the audacity to, in this caption here for 3 biblical declarations to pray over your marriage. Caption is 2 sentences. Send this to Bay. Save it for later.
Where you get the audacity?
I remember when I first saw that post go live, I was like, Ruth, that's genius, folks.
35,000 likes.
Yes.
That's funny. I think what helps with audacity is having leaders that trust you. Because
True.
my pastor trusts my direction and he trusts like the route that I'm to take. Like if we have ideas, he's so open. He's like, hey, whatever you guys think is best. And that really does help give you room to implement changes to to reach the demographic that you wanted to. Because I can imagine if our social media was run in a way where we were being policed constantly, and you have to think about, well, how's pastor going to feel about this? How's it? Yes, there's what's the word? There's accountability. Yes, there's accountability, but if it's, I know for here at Legacy Church, there's no sense of stifling, and so that helps with audacity. And so a caption like "Send this to Bay." It resonates with the kind of audience you want to reach, right? Because let's say newly married couple, 21 to about 30, they just got married, they don't have kids. When they were dating, everything was la 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 la, and then you get married and you realize, hey, marriage isn't la 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 la. Now they see a caption like "Send this to Bay," they're like, oh, this is talking to me.
Yeah.
Because I speak the language of Bay. A 60-year-old
Bay
doesn't. A 60-year-old probably doesn't know what Bay is, So no offense. Maybe you do. Maybe you know what Bay is. I'm not trying to disrespect 60-year-olds, but
Look, we got some cool 60-year-olds out here. They're with the slang.
So yeah. I think for sure having leaders that trust your vision, that give you leverage to try new things, it definitely helps.
Right. So there's a couple things there that you're observing. One, you never want to like put on lingo, front in a way that isn't authentic and genuine to you. But if it's genuine and it makes sense for the application, and that's exactly what Instagram is, then it's not only appropriate to use that type of language, it's actually like more effective because it's denoting kind of the casual nature that we're so accustomed to on Instagram. And let me just say, the first comment on this post, and again, this is identical formatting, identical design, but just different subject matter to the 3 biblical declarations to pray over your finances. This is 3 biblical declarations to pray over your marriage. Here's the first comment. I'm just going to read it verbatim. Quote, I miss my husband so much. It's been 10 years since he passed. I loved his kindness, his devotion, his sweet daily notes to me. He was a hardworking person. He'd leave for work at 5 a.m. I remember his favorite foods to this day. If I had a long day, he sometimes would rub my back and give me a foot massage. We would share our devotions, and occasionally he would order me a new book by one of our favorite Christian authors. We enjoyed dancing, walking, and gardening together. Our walks on the beach are some of my favorite memories. I thank God for the good times and even the hard times of our 36 years of marriage. That's the top comment. So a post like this is not only encouraging people to take a moment in their busy day and pray for their partner, whether they're across the room or, across the state on a work trip, wherever they might be, but it's now eliciting testimony. Mm-hmm. This is testimony of someone devoted to Jesus who, by their account, had a strong Christ-centered marriage. And now, you mentioned that 21-year-old that is perhaps kind of reading through this. Now they're also seeing this is what the end of the race looks like, and a race well run. Mm-hmm. And that's amazing about social is because it's not just what we're creating, but it's what we're creating and then what that elicits from others and what they might be sharing.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
That was the cutest story I've ever heard.
That's a really good point.
And I just want to celebrate you for a moment. This is proof of the intentionality behind every single one of your decisions. So Ruth, you're talking about praying about what to post on social. You come up with this post idea, it goes well once, so you're repeating it because you know this is connecting with people. You're Vitaly, you're mentioning shooting B-roll very intentionally. You guys are crafting these posts in your head before you even create them. Vitaly's shooting, you're putting these stuff together, and then with a caption that we've laughed about, but was, and Ruth, you've articulated it so well, was so intentional. You knew who you were trying to reach with that post, and the language, both literally and metaphorically, that they speak. And so that post probably gets traction with folks who are using that language, and the algorithm says, this is a good post, we're going to show it to more people. And now, here you have the top comment, which is probably put up there because it's the most liked comment, from an older woman who maybe doesn't speak that language, but the post found her because it was resonating with folks who do speak that language, sharing her testimony, and like Braid said, folks who are landing on that post are not only now encouraged by the post, but encouraged by the testimony in the comments. Like, that is such a beautiful embodiment of like the mosaic of Christian community, that assuming none of those folks who are engaging with, or very few of those folks who engage with that post belong to your actual community in Chicopee, but the collective capital C Christian community. And it's all built on the back of your intentionality in all those different decisions. So good on you for being so intentional with all of your choices you're making with all of these social posts.
And let me also say, there's 2 parts to that caption. Share this with Bay, which is the funny part, but the other part, which is on all 3 of the posts that I have in front of me here, 3 biblical declarations insert here, which is in some format, save this for later.
Yep.
Now, I don't have those numbers in front of me because that would only be seen by @Legacy Church Official on their side of things. I can see the likes, but I'm quite confident because these are guided, which that wasn't something that registered to me. And when Ruth said that was a big light bulb moment for myself. She's saying explicitly, save this for later.
Yeah, share it and save it.
This is a guided meditation. This is a guided prayer. Share it with someone. Save it for later. Those are 2 of the most signaling metrics for the algorithm, because it's one thing to hit double tap and keep going, but watching something 3 or 4 times because Ruth has just tricked you into not realizing that the beat is repeating, that's a great tactic. Just simply saying out loud, hey, or in the actual caption, save this and share this. When someone saves it, I always look, my carousels, like they have so many saves because they're kind of like educational in nature. People are like, ooh, this is a good tip I want to save for later. Just asking for that. I always ask for it on the final end screen. Incredibly Incredibly important. And then I want to emphasize too, the guided element to this. When we kind of started creating these prayer countdowns back when Instagram video was like 1 by 1 or 4 by 5, 2018, around then, we would kind of have this countdown timer that said, spend the next 60 seconds praying for your spouse. But what Ruth and Vitaly have hit on here so great is a lot of times people don't have the words to say. That's straight from Scripture. When you don't have the words to say, here's how to pray like your Father in heaven. And that's what leads us into the Lord's Prayer. It can be so powerful and empowering to just say, hey, if you don't know what to pray, if this isn't something that you do very often, maybe you're not a person with a faith background and you're coming across this. Surely there are thousands of people in the millions and millions of views that are accounted for here that are not of a Christian faith background. They can still say that prayer. Say a prayer for your partner, and they might not have any familiarity with that. You might have grown up in a Christian tradition your whole life and still not know what to say. Maybe you've never prayed like that for your partner or for your own children. And so that guided element, incredibly, incredibly powerful. Let's talk about a darker element, okay? Let's take this in a sadder direction, which is, and this is for you, Vitaly, a lot of times when we see folks taking video and capturing photography inside of worship services, we hear churches say, okay, how do you make people feel comfortable with that? And then second, do you let them know? Is there signage somewhere? And how is your church kind of navigating these delicate moments in that respect?
For me, I like to stay as far away from them as possible so they don't even notice that their picture is taken, so they can fully develop themselves in worship and not have to worry about oh, there's a dude 3 feet away from me with a camera on me. Then when that happens, people tend to either shut themselves out or really just show out for the camera. They're like, oh, one hand raised, oh, camera's on me, 2 hands raised. I was like, all right, settle down.
Yeah.
They'll see me, they'll give it a side eye, then they're like, oh, wait, camera's on me. Hopefully I'm on their page next week. So usually for sentimental things, for when someone's in a deep moment, bawling or something like that, sometimes I won't even shoot that, and I'll just let them have that moment. If I can capture it authentically and kind of out of the way, I will. But I mostly just like to let people be in that presence instead of have them kind of notice that I'm trying to get a shot or something.
So really practical, what length of lens are you shooting with for these? Because to feel like you're up close and to stand far away, I'm assuming there's some type of telephoto or longer lens.
Yep, I'm shooting on the Tamron 35 to 150. So I can go pretty wide or I can really close in on the 150 range. And then with the Sony,
what's the aperture on that?
F2 to 2.8. So I get a nice shallow field throughout the whole. It is a chunky lens though. It's got some weight to it, so it's not for the faint of hands.
Faint of hands, I was gonna say the same thing.
Vitaly's in the gym all throughout the week working on those forearms so that he can hold this telephoto lens.
Just to hold this camera.
Well, it's true because
it's
it's really tough when you're in a sanctuary because it's really dark. But you also want to stand far enough away so you can leave room for those intimate moments to not be interfered with by you. Well, typically telephoto lenses are not going to have an aperture that you can open up really wide. So now you can stay far away, but your photos are going to be dark, or you can get really close and kind of interfere the moment, but then your photos are going to be light. And then if you have a zoom lens, one single lens that can do both, certainly you're not going to be able to do all these things. It sounds like this lens, the only trade-off is its bulk. And those lenses do exist where you can have the really wide focal length all the way down to 35, all the way up to 150. That is a very broad range. Great aperture. Yeah. And I guess the only downside is it's super heavy.
And probably price. Lens like that.
Tamron lenses are not crazy though, typically. I mean, do you know the price of that lens offhand? I can look it up.
I think 1,600, somewhere around there.
Yeah. All right, well then, it is expensive. So it's expensive and it's heavy.
I mean, that compared to
you can't put a price on souls.
Wow, you can't. And it's basically functioning as multiple lenses in one. Mm-hmm. And so in that respect, price tag is well worth it. You can buy a couple, 3 maybe, to kind of fill out that focal length range, and then you're at that price anyway.
Yeah, and then
a couple other posts that. Oh, please go ahead.
Yeah, and at that point, if you have multiple lenses, you have to swap out lenses to get different shots. With that, I just have one camera, one lens, go anywhere, do whatever I need to do, instead of having to waste time. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about gear. Folks are always curious about that. You've mentioned the lens. What camera body are we shooting on?
Camera body, we're shooting on the A7 IV currently.
Love it.
Classic.
We're big Sony fans here ourselves. And then editing tool of choice?
Editing tool of choice for me, I'm freshly on DaVinci Resolve, but I used to do Final Cut.
Our guy. Our guy. Yeah. We love to see it. We love to see it.
So it's so good.
I'm still a Final Cut girl, so.
That's all right. That's all right.
I'm gonna just sit in the corner over here. You guys can have a DaVinci.
We've all been there. I mean, we started there, so.
Yeah. Everyone usually starts with like Final Cut, and then they either go to Premiere or now DaVinci. Or they just started off with Premiere, and I don't know. I'll just pray for them.
Yeah, the problem with Premiere, like we use it in a lot of our contexts begrudgingly because it has a really nice workflow for Lightroom to Photoshop to Premiere to After Effects, and so we can kind of like do everything in the single suite. And then I'll try to bring something just to Resolve, but then I'll still have to end up bringing it into Lightroom or Photoshop for something else. And now I'm still paying for 2 licenses either way, not to mention Audition, which we'll use even producing this podcast. Got a couple more posts in front of me here that I wanted to highlight. So these would fall under the same kind of category, I would say, of, biblical exposition or posts that compel and encourage spiritual practice, which we have been talking about for years and years now. This one in front of me, the title is How to Discern God's Voice. And then there are 2 categories. There's God's voice with a check mark and a bunch of like bullet points underneath. God's voice might sound like this, like this, like this. And then the other column juxtaposed to God's voice is my voice. It's like, here's when you might be listening to yourself. And this is another type of post that did really well, close to 20,000 likes. Maybe, Ruth, do you want to talk about the inception of that post and what you might remember of that? It was in May, so a few months ago now.
I'm going to be very honest. That one dropped straight from heaven. I had nothing to do with that one.
It makes sense, right? God's voice. And Ruth's like, that wasn't my voice, let me tell you.
Not my post, it's God's post.
It was one of those, it was so strong in me, share about this, and I had a choice of making it carousel or making it a reel. And maybe that part was me. As far as the content type, that wasn't me, but then the decision on the format, that was me. So I opted to go with Reels just because Instagram is pushing Reels, and I wanted the message to reach more people as opposed to the carousel. But that's it. So you guys pray over your social media content.
There you go.
Let God guide you and direct you, and don't be afraid to be daring and bold.
And have some audacity.
Ruth, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Ruth, it sounds like, and you, Vitaly, as well, you're embodying the spirit of your community on the show so well. I can hear that you value staying connected with God spiritually, and I hear that you value community and practicing faith in person together so much. And we talk about these social posts that do well. Like I saw one of yours today, 500,000 views. Like that's just so many people. But you don't have 500,000 people coming to your church, of course. So talk to me more about how you marry your social strategy and the reach that you have online with how you practice your faith in person with your church in Chicopee, with the folks who belong to Legacy Church in that specific place at this specific time.
How we marry it? Well, that's a good question. I think, how do I put this? I'm trying to think of, because in my mind, I'm thinking it's not so much about marrying the two. It's more so just about letting who we are flow in all aspects of what we do. So it's not like social media is, it's a concept outside of who we are, and so we have to make both of them meet. It's just this is what we believe, this is what we're about. How do we make social media represent what we believe? And that's really what it is. So I feel like um, yes, yes. This is what I'm going
Light
to
bulb.
say. Yeah, the light bulb just went on. This is what I'm going to say. So one thing that I feel like in social media, one thing that I wouldn't say is a scare but something that I've always tried to be careful of. Like when you go viral for something you don't represent, it is hard to stay in that vein. Like imagine we went viral because we posted about cats that were running because it was a fun post. Now how do we sustain that? And there's nothing wrong with cats doing whatever, but that's not who we are. That's not what we represent. But then you get all these people that come onto your page, but then they're not finding what they liked or what they saw, what Instagram showed them. So I feel like that's really what it boils down to, that level of authenticity. This is who we are, but it's a matter of like finding a creative way to express who you already are. So then social media is not a front. Social media is not you having to try to think of whatever. You're just replicating what happens in the church building in a way that resonates with people that are outside of the church building.
It's kind of like the stained glass doors. It's like you get a view of what's like in the church on the social media, and then when those doors are open for you, you're like, oh wow, this is just how I kind of pictured it. This is just how they show
This is who we
themselves.
are. Yeah. So that's how I would answer that.
It's really interesting because we had a conversation last week with one church, and they've seen kind of similar numbers in terms of reach on individual posts as you. And the pattern that they've seen is also the pattern that we're seeing with your content, which is really interesting. And that is when you have a post that goes, viral for you or viral for anyone, what often happens is people will follow you, get engaged with your specific profile from that post, and then it's that kind of content that will get wide reach again. So with one church, it was parenting content. They would have their pastors sharing from stage about parenting and how scripture and God's mission aligns with that, and that was the content that would consistently do well, outperform all the other type of content. Kind of seeing a similar pattern with legacy churches, Instagram at least, where that post on the list post, that biblical exposition, that spiritual practice, that's what did especially well. And then every other post like that has also outperformed other content on the page. This is just how things work. People get to know you for a certain thing. It's like, oh, at the beginning, Brady, all he did was talk about video announcements. I was the video announcements guy at the very beginning, 10 years ago. And then you kind of get known for one thing, and you keep doing that thing over and over, and you keep serving people in that way. That's the repeat the best. But then what you don't want to stop doing is continuing to test, because the one downside is you can kind of get like pigeonholed into this one thing. It's that actor that like did one movie that everyone liked, and now they're only getting typecast in that specific role. It can be both a blessing and a curse in that respect. And to what you were saying, Ruth, the worst thing that could ever happen is the post that goes viral is like one that was not at all a reflection of your church. Because if you do have a post that does well, what's going to happen is, ideally, it's a reflection of your church, but it's not a 100% reflection of your church. And this can be difficult for people because, one church was saying to us last week, they're like, "What we do talk about things other than parenting, and yet it's that type of content that continues to do really well." I'm like, yeah, this is just kind of how it goes, because the audience is like, oh, I get this type of content from this type of profile. And so you definitely don't want that post that does well to be about cats, let's say, or something that is incongruent with what your church is doing in person, because then not only are you going to become known for something that you are actually not about at all, but it can have a negative impact even on some of your other content. Have you felt at all, like, has there ever been that kind of like weird internal feeling like, man, like I have other good content, like I'm not a one-trick Ruth, I can do other things as well?
Oh yeah.
Not yet. Not yet. Not yet. I want to say in our particular case, we've been fortunate enough that the heart of our ministry is what is also resonating with people on social media. And so even though, let's say, we share about community, or we might share about when we do activities in the church, um, realistically, what like the posts that are going far is truly what we want people to know in this season of our life in the church. And so I think there's a bit of grace there, where we've been graced and favored enough that the heart of the church is what's also. I definitely, if that wasn't the case, there would have had to be a moment where we pivot to try to transition into, okay, how do we get all these people to come on board a different message? But right now, I think we're really swimming in that river beautifully.
That's awesome. I wanted to ask about things translating over to in person. We like to call these the crossover events, where you have a post that does really well, and then that translates to a new person finding your church, or what happens more often is it affects your existing congregation. Someone sees the content, and then they walk up to you in the lobby, hey, I really loved that post this weekend. It was, what was it about? Like 3 prayers for your kids or something? I remember praying that. I was on my lunch break, and that was really cool. Thanks, Ruth. Love what you're doing. Can you tell us anything about that? Any stories that come to mind?
Yeah. I actually do have one story about that. It's one of our photographers now on my team came to our church because they saw one of our posts, and then became an active member in it, and then was like, hey, I would love to join your media team. So it's really just full circle of how one person saw the post, and now they're making the posts for other people to then be impacted by that.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, and so we do have stories like that, where we are seeing people come to church because of the post. And what we're also seeing, which is really incredible, is so we have Sunday service on Sunday, and then we are getting visitors come to church because of the post. But then on top of Sunday service, we also have a prayer service on the first Monday of the month. And what is interesting about that dynamic is our prayer services we're seeing people that are not members of our church come to our prayer service. And so because our posts are about prayer and how to pray, those that are resonating with that, they find another opportunity being our prayer service to engage with our community, because maybe they do have their stand-in churches that they go to on Sundays, like, whatever the case may be. But our prayer services it's almost like it has a life on its own, with its own kind of audience, its own congregation. Yeah. And so there's this sort of, someone might visit our church because of prayer, and then from prayer, they will join the church. But then we have seen instances where we're continuing to see it, where people are just coming to church on Sunday, visiting because they saw an Instagram post. Yeah.
I'm so glad you said that for this reason. I have been thinking lately about social media and new media in that respect, compared to traditional media that churches have used to kind of get the word out about the ministry. Right? I say, hey, we just want people to know. So I was talking with a pastor recently. I was like, I just want people to know we're here. Like, at the very least, I just want them to know we're here. And what would you do back in the day? You'd maybe, at the high end, rent a billboard or make like a TV spot. On the low end, you might do mailers. You might
Newspaper ad,
yeah. Even some radio. I remember doing that, like kind of like, early 2000s. What is so narrow about that type of marketing or media is that all it does is hopefully serve people that are not yet connected to your church. What's amazing about social content, as you have so aptly described there, is that yes, this content is serving people that are not yet connected to our church and getting them connected. But even if it never did that, it's serving the people in your congregation already. It's reminding them of the goodness of God. It's teaching them about the Bible. It's prompting them to hit pause wherever they're at in the 167 hours beyond Sunday service and engage in spiritual practice. It's this amazing fallback effect that even if you don't reach a ton of new people, which you are, which is so exciting for a church, especially in your region, but even if it didn't, all the good would come from like the spiritual work that's already happening. That's why I love social media so much. I'm having now a light bulb moment. Thank you, Ruth.
You look so excited. Yeah, social media is really great. It's really, really great.
Well, let's talk about the not so great part, which is the comments. So, what's nice about these specific posts that went viral, in a sense, is that no human is in the post. We were talking with another church, and they're like, "Yeah, I was the one on camera," and so everyone was like, "You suck." The nice thing here is that it's just content. So my guess is the negative comments that you're receiving, because any post that reaches a wide audience is going to reach a vocal minority of people that don't like it, because that's what social, unfortunately, at its worst becomes. My guess is people are maybe nitpicking with the theology. Is that what you're seeing? And if not, what are you seeing? How are you dealing with the negativity?
Definitely picking at the theology for sure, because that's the focus. For me, I have a very strong, what's that expression? A strong back. Like, negative comments don't get to me.
The firm foundation of our resolve.
Yeah, it really doesn't. I think that my rule of thumb with addressing negative comments is if it derails from the heart of the message. And so if it's something that, let's say, if somebody were to view that comment, and because of that comment, they're now confused on a foundational principle of, biblical doctrine or something to that effect, or because of that comment is painting our church to be what it's not. I think things that are detrimental to our representation are things that I would say that I would actually take the time to express. And if I have to explain it from a different perspective, still grounded in biblical doctrine, I will. But if it's just a hate comment, people that don't know what they're talking about, I just let it slide. So I think that's my rule of thumb. Really, it's just the whole thing is to help. And so if a comment is going to derail someone, I'm going to help somebody else that might see that comment and be confused by explaining myself.
I've also gone through the comments and I've seen other people literally fight on our behalf on other comments. They're like, no, that's not what they meant. They meant it through here. And I'm just like, what a warrior. Thank you. I appreciate you. Kind citizen.
People do fight on our behalf, and that's nice. But yeah, I do have audacity in the comments too. So don't try.
Don't try me.
I love to hear that. So what's next, Ruth? What's next, Vitaly, for what you're planning on doing on social media? Is this type of content, is it going to kind of hold like a permanent spot in your weekly, monthly rotation? Are you experimenting with any other types of content, ideas that you've maybe had that are half-baked that you haven't tested out just yet?
So the direction that we're heading in, so this type of content, it will stay in our rotation, just because that's what brought people through the doors. And so we want to maintain that sense of family or familiarity. And so people would still remember that that's who we are. So we're keeping that type of content. I think last week we posted one for God's salvation, just to put that. Was it last week or this week? Well, actually, it was just this Monday. But as far as where we're going, we wanted to try organic reach. So the beginning was all about organic reach. And so from now, we're about to start delving really heavily into targeted marketing and ads. And so what we're doing specifically in October of this year, our prayer service in October, we're really going home with it, and we're having a miracle service. I don't know, on our page right now, something that we're doing also as like a social media campaign is like 100 Miracle Challenge, where we're challenging people to believe in miracles. So it's congruent with like our prayer post. And so I think in this season, we really just want people to think prayer when they think about Legacy Church. And so in October for our prayer service, we're sort of tying it all in with the 100 Miracle Challenge and having a miracle service. So with that miracle service, we're going to test the waters with social media ads and try to get people through the doors in that way. So from a social media front, that is the next direction that we're going in, just believing and trusting God to do amazing things. But then as far as in-house, like the kind of content that we're gonna start putting out are we're going to put out some more original content. So that is the next phase. And obviously original content requires more work on the production front. And so like, as far as like the in-house worship, what happens in worship, because we've done, I think the beginning was getting people to align themselves with the message of the church. And now that there's that sense of alignment, now we're moving into the space of, okay, this is what happens inside of the church. And so we're setting things up behind the scenes now, where we want to start pushing out like original content, the live worship that happens, the live ministry that happens, the live prayer that happens, and you know, rotating that with the sermons that we already post, and then the prayer post. So that's where we're heading. It requires a lot of work, but God is our strength.
He will provide.
With our very small team.
I want to highlight something you said. We don't normally get into strategy this deep, but you said we're going to keep this type of post kind of in our weekly, monthly rotation. And I think if you're a church listening, watching, who's ever had a post that does go viral for you, viral for anyone, and you see a ton of engagement, and you do get a bunch of new followers. So there was a church last week that DM'd me, they're like, hey, we got 10,000 new followers off this one type of post. It is important to honor the people that followed you from that content and understand that in many ways, a social media relationship is transactional. And what I mean by that is when you follow someone, you're expecting something from that account. And if you do depart and do something entirely different, and we've all seen this with a person that we follow or an account that we follow, they're like, hey, I'm doing this new thing now. And you're like, hey, look, I love that for you. Just so you know, that's not why I followed. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, any church can do whatever they feel God is leading them towards, what they feel is best. But the thing to not forget is that if you decide to go in a completely different direction and abandon what you brought people in for, you're going to probably suffer from dropping engagement, because people don't just unfollow, people ignore. So if you have 10,000 followers and they followed you for parenting content, or they followed you for content that encourages spiritual practice or does biblical exposition, and then you never do that ever again, you do something that's completely different, you're in the church realm, so you'll probably not see this as bad as some other people. Like, I used to do fitness content, now I'm a chef. But what you'll probably see is 10,000 people in there that have now 10,000 reasons to not engage with your content in the same way. And now, what does that mean? The followers that existed before that, your congregation in church, they might not see your content as much because the engagement has dropped so dramatically from an overall profile level. And so, we don't normally get into this because it's kind of like a byproduct, something to consider if you see this huge traction on social, but we're seeing more and more churches have these posts that pop off and you gain all these followers, and it's not something you ever thought would happen. And now there are some repercussions to be mindful of. So I think it's very wise, Ruth, and I'm certain based on our brief discussion here that you are mindful of this. You seem very on top of things, that, hey, people came for this reason. There is a transactional element here. I'm not going to just abandon that altogether. Yeah, I'm going to push forward. I'm going to continue to test, but I'm going to keep repeating the best as well.
Yeah. And the thing I like about that content, it's educational. So it's not just like an eye catcher where that got a lot of views. It's something that is practical and educational that people can save and go back to. So it's very important to keep going with that, because we're never stop learning and we're never going to stop teaching and informing our followers.
Yeah, it aligns with the mission of the local church and what we care about. What we do know, and we'll kind of leave on this, Ruth and Vitaly, is that folks that serve in your role often can feel pretty isolated, right? There aren't too many people that are dedicated to social media in the world yet still. Broadly speaking, there are even fewer that are dedicated to social media in a church context, production in a church context. But there are a lot of people in that context that are listening and watching right now. What would you say to those people in the season of life that you're in, keeping in mind that we are this very, very small community?
For me, I would just say just to jump in and just trust where the Lord is leading you. Because for me, I was on vacation on the beach praying to the Lord. I'm like, Lord, what do you want me to do next? And then one of our church leaders that ran the video department, literally like 5 minutes after me praying, told me like, hey, do you want to join the video department and like really lead that? I was like, okay, God. I was like, yeah, absolutely. And then it just jumped from there. So really just trust where the Lord is leading you and surround yourself with people that are encouraging you and inspiring you as well. Because a lot of times people feel isolated because they try to overachieve themselves just by doing everything on themselves. They just rely on, oh, what can I do? Instead of, what can I get someone to help me to do to really increase it further? So you really got to like check your pride and be okay with being part of a team and stepping back.
Yeah, that's so true. And then I think what I'll add to that also with social media production is just know that you aren't alone. Even if because I think getting volunteers for church in and of itself is a hurdle. And so social media and production, like, it's like, yeah, you need a volunteer, but then you also need them to have a level of skill. And I think that's why this particular ministry sometimes is just harder to recruit for, because like who knows how to use a camera, who knows how to use social media. And so there's also this burden of training, and if you're short staffed, how do you even train? So yada yada yada. So feeling isolated is very real, but yeah, really know that you are not alone. Like, whatever God assigns you to, he makes the provision for that assignment. And that's something that I truly do believe in, even to the point of giving ideas, even to the point of, sometimes you might come across a post on social media that will give you vision for what you're supposed to do. So you really aren't alone. God is with you. God is walking you through this whole process. And God is helping you. And then I will also say, have fun. Have fun with social media. I think something that does sort of stifle our work in social media is when we get too much in our heads and you're overthinking the process, overthinking the content. Yes, we're representing a church, and so there's decorum and there are things of that nature, but like, learn to have fun. Just let loose. Sometimes I think one thing, when I took up a social media director, and this might go against the grain, but one thing I stripped was this whole, like, Monday, post about prayer. Tuesday, post about announcement. Wednesday, post about this. For me personally, as a creative, I felt like it's very restricting to the flow of creativity. So what we implement is more so about themes of what we can post. So ideas on what we can post. And so we have like, we can post encouragement, teaching, community. And then I think we have a fourth one that's coming. It's leaving my mind. Oh, and then recaps. So encouragement, teaching, community, recaps. And so we have these 4 categories. And the whole idea is like, whatever idea comes to your mind in these 4 categories, fire away. So that way, as a creative, you don't feel like, oh, today is Monday, I have to I have to post about prayer, but I'm not inspired to post about prayer. Don't post about prayer, post about something else. But so I think I do more of like that, the categories of posts. These are the kinds of things you're to post about, but how you post, feel free, like, be creative, let the Spirit lead you. And that's more so how we can have fun with social media in that way, so we're not so restricted.
Yeah. I have one more thing for people that are just picking up a camera and just starting with their social media thing for their pages. It's okay to fail. It's okay to put out something kind of bad when you're starting out, because you're really just learning the process. So it's okay to fail, and it's okay to kind of be bad at times, because you're just going to grow and then increase your skills and just like really continue to grow. And then people will see that. It's like, wow, I see your heart in it, which for me is a lot more important than your skill set. Because I could always teach you a skill set, but I can't teach you heart.
That's facts.
So just go for it.
at Legacy Church Official on Instagram. Take that, all you non-official legacy churches. Is there any other places that people should be checking out what you're doing online, guys?
We're also on YouTube, and our YouTube handle is at Legacy Church Official. Our website is legacychurchofficial.com because, it's important to be official.
We even have an app. I'm pretty sure Legacy
Yes,
Church Official.
the app
Is it
is
Legacy Church?
Official.
Yeah, so with our app, you can get our sermons, videos, tune into our live stream through your phone if you're not on YouTube, and get notifications.
I think you guys can tell being congruent is something we really like here at Legacy Church. Official.
And that is something that we value very much as well. We value your time. Thank you for spending it with us. And thanks as always, everyone listening, for your time, attention, and trust. And we will talk to you next week.
Wow, Darren's upset that we didn't say well, hey there.
Yeah.
The intro turned out good, though.
I mean, it's spectacular. And it's so much better than, it's so great. And, now the well, hey there will be saved for Bro Church Tools. And then people will really know they're in for it, right?